Grey Magic by J.T. Lawrence. When people ask me what I do, I usually lie. I used to tell the truth, when I was young and had an exoskeleton woven from life spirit and arrogance, as most young people do, before that threaded shell was gradually eroded by the hurt in the world, the violence, the bad luck. Now only middle-aged, liver-spotted skin remains, which is no adequate barrier to life's bashing. Now I have to protect myself in other ways. Age and wisdom bring another type of armor. I used to tell the truth, but now the lies slide out of my mouth like spotted eels, easy and familiar. When I get bored of the untruths, I make up more, to keep things interesting. A year ago, I would have told you, if I'd bumped into you at a conference or a cocktail party, that I was a botanist. The trick to believable deception, as I'm sure you know, is to keep it as truthful as possible. I've trained in botany, so it is an obvious one that springs quickly to my just-licked lips. But I'm also qualified, fib-wise, to be a doctor, an astronomer, a zoologist, an archaeologist, a chemical engineer. Sometimes I surprise myself. My subconscious becomes adventurous, wants to pursue less lofty careers. I become a marketing consultant, a sous chef, a yoga instructor. When I was starting out, I thought I had to tell people what I did, what I really did, in order to get work. But I've since found that when you do the work well, the work will come. The universe, after all, supports action. Now, I only accept referrals from close friends and previous clients, the ones that are still alive, anyway. The reality is there is never any shortage of demand for the kind of work I do. Telling strangers about my vocation hardly ever translates into real jobs anyway. I find time wasters incredibly annoying. I picture them as Velcro-legged parasites that cling to my aura until they have unloaded their whole sorry story, only to refuse my offer of professional help. It takes all the self-control I can muster to not place some kind of small, irritating hex on them, a monkey on their back, just to cause them the same amount of chagrin that they have caused me. That kind of tit-for-tat may seem childish to you, but it keeps the cosmos nicely balanced. An eye for an eye, out of the old book, was never meant to be vengeful or malicious. It was instead to keep the balance. If the balance is off, bad things can happen. Some people call it karma. Others say that the wheel turns. It's all true, no matter how you choose to dress it up, with gory stories of biblical eye-gouging savagery or with glittering, ice-cream-colored animal gods. The wheel just keeps on turning. Worse than the time wasters are the impromptu sermons delivered to me in inopportune places, like on the train, or standing in line for my daily fix. It's awkward. I'm always amazed at how many religious fanatics there are in our midst, dressed like ordinary people, slacks and crumpled tees, or polka-dotted summer dresses and glass beads, doing things that ordinary people do, eating processed cheese sandwiches and listening to music on their phones, using greasy hand cream that smells of roses. They seem so normal from the outside. It's only when they start babbling about necromantic prophets and being saved that you realize they have demons in their heads. When you look closely, you see black scribbles on their auras. In my opinion, religious fundamentalism is a psychological disorder that has yet to be officially classified. It's easy for me, in this day and age, to sit in the branches of my oak tree, feeling the light dapple my cheeks, the breeze lifting my hair, as if flying, when all feels right in the world, and ruminate about these people. But my predecessors weren't that lucky. There were no tree dreams for them, no leisure to sit in a leafy bower and shine acorns, contemplating the spinning cycle of life. Just a couple of 100 years ago, I would have been dragged down and lit up. Sometimes I wake up in a fever, as if I'm on fire. It spreads from my feet upwards, like I am burning on a stake somewhere in a parallel or previous life. The first time it happened, when I was a little girl, I just lay there and blazed. I remember feeling paralyzed by the fear of my destiny, perhaps even wished to burn up altogether. wished me nothing more than a glint of sad ashes in the creeping morning light. The next day, my legs were covered in blisters. The time after that, I ran an ice bath as soon as I felt it start, which I have been doing ever since. I lie in the Arctic water and listen to my heart slow, run ice cubes over my flickering skin, absorbing the cold, the opposite of a sun lizard. Sometimes the fever brings with it auditory hallucinations, chanting, shouting, the sound of an angry mob, the crackling of a spiteful fire. I don't know if I experience these episodes because my energy has an intense empathy for my foremothers, or if they are echoes of my previous or future lives. Whatever the reason, I thank the universe daily for the age of enlightenment. Of course, I use the word enlightenment loosely. I'm also grateful for my ice machine. So I lie about what I do because of the fundamentalists and the time wasters, and also to preserve my psychic energy. I've had enough of the rubbernecking. This fox-mantle of dishonesty, this deception, can be lonely. But in my experience, and as parents warn, no good comes from talking to strangers. At the moment, if anyone asks, I'm a shopkeeper. In a way, it's true. I sell all kinds of ideas scratched on paper. I've always liked the idea of owning a bookshop. It's not only strangers I lie to. I'm less than honest with my clients, too. I guess you could say that I place less emphasis on the truth than most people, but only ever for the right reasons. I find honesty for the sake of honesty naive, and often unnecessarily harmful. Sometimes a profound dishonest act can have a major positive effect on someone's life. For example, a client of mine, let's call her Betty, was having trouble getting pregnant. I could sense in the first consultation that she was perfectly fertile. Her energy was the color of a ripe mandarin. But despite this, Betty's womb remained stubbornly barren. I told her I'd have her pregnant within 3 new moons. All it would take was some skillful spellcrafting, an eggshell sale, and a little resourcefulness on my side. In the Dark Ages, we were called the cunning folk for good reason. It was clear to me that her husband's sperm was the problem, although Betty wouldn't entertain this idea, wouldn't even insult him by having him tested, as if he was some kind of caveman with the emotional intelligence of a Sumatran orangutan. The matter of their infertility was not even discussed in their household, apart from their monthly ritual of him shooting reproachful looks at her tear-stained face, raw and bruised by her steady disappointment. They had been trying for 6 years, which was good news for me. 6 is an incredibly fertile number, as you can probably guess from the shape. It also told me that if it hadn't happened by now, it probably wasn't going to happen unless I took some drastic action. Once I was prepared, Betty was mid-cycle, and the moon was full. It was time to cast the spell. She had invited her sister Danielle for moral support, as she was keeping my services a secret from her orangutan. "I just want you to know that I don't approve of what you do," were the first words the sister said to me. "Okay," I said, and continued to unpack my things. I would have preferred, "Hello." "I just don't think it's right," she insisted. "Oh, Danielle," sighed Betty. "In fact, I think," she started. I could tell that she was about to hit her stride if I didn't interrupt her. "You are more than welcome," I said, "to wait outside." "Outside?" she said, as if it was the first time she had ever heard the word. I found myself wishing that she would close her gaping fish mouth. If we were characters in a comic book, I could have waved my wand, abracadabra, and turned her into a pufferfish, bouncing and flapping on the kitchen floor. "There is no place for negative energy here tonight," I said, slowly and clearly to the sister. "If you have a problem, it's best to go and leave this sacred space." I was hamming it up a bit, for effect. Perhaps I'm less mature than I give myself credit for. "Sacred," she gasped. "Sacred!" It took remarkable restraint on my behalf to not ask her if English was her first language. If her reaction wasn't interfering with my work, I would have found her outrage quite entertaining. "Look, Dan, this was a mistake." "Yes, that's what I was trying to tell you." "No, I mean, I think you should go," Betty said to her, gently. I'm not leaving you with this. What would she think would happen if she left her sister in my supposedly evil clutches, I wondered. That I would possess her? Kill her? Steal her soul? I wasn't surprised by Danielle's attitude. You're bound to bump up against some people in my business. People who believe that witchery is wicked. Little do they know that they cast spells themselves, when they curse other drivers in traffic, touch wood, or blow out birthday candles. I need this to work, said Betty. Listen to me, whispered her sister, bunching up her fists around the gold crucifix that dangled from her moist and unpleasantly chunky neck. You don't need to do this. Come to our church. Our cell group has been praying for you. And she has yet to conceive, I said. You say you don't like spells? What do you think prayer is? You just haven't been saying the right ones. Blasphemy, her aura shouted. And I suppose you know the right ones, she eyed me, a wolf in wolf's clothing. Yes, I said. It's my job. I began the ceremony by smudging the room with a sweet smoke of lavender and white sage. With a piece of chalkstone, I drew a circle on the pine floorboards around Betty, on which I placed 6 green candles. I anointed the candles with vanilla oil, lit them, then began my fertility incantation. Betty was instructed to close her eyes and sit as still as possible, as if meditating, and just allow the spell to wash through her. Her hands were placed over her abdomen, sending warmth and acceptance deep into her pelvic chakra. Afterwards, we sailed the eggshell by moonlight while Betty recited a poem she had written, inviting the soul of her baby into her body. I found her vulnerability touching, and couldn't help thinking that she would make a tender mother. I gave her a silver bracelet with a charm of carnelian-eyed hair. I had charged the crystal with pentacle cast spells, as well as a gift of bespoke tea, stinging nettle, red clove, and raspberry leaf, which she was to drink every day. She held my hands and thanked me. On my way out, I gave her a syringe I had been keeping warm between my breasts. I told her it was a potion to open and soften her cervix, and that she should keep it at blood temperature and use it before making love to her husband that night. 6 weeks later, Betty was pregnant, as I knew she would be. She has since given birth to a bonny little boy with a full head of hair and an easy smile. Her orangutan will never know that the child is not biologically his. The timing of Betty's lunar cycle couldn't have been more perfect. I had been consulting that day with another client of mine who was having trouble sustaining his phallus. Fairy, or sexual mysticism, is a speciality of mine, and I'd been training him in the art of tantra. This client wasn't dissimilar looking to the man in the wedding photo that Betty had given me. Without going into too many details, this client had inadvertently given me the means to help Betty. The universe had been particularly supportive that day, as it can be, when you are following a beneficent course of action. Neither client was aware of the transaction, and they were both extremely pleased with the results. Had I been honest with either of them, the outcome would not have been nearly as satisfactory. The thing about earth magic is that it can go either way. We are all under the influence of so many factors at any one time that it's not an exaggeration to say that anything can happen. Without even knowing it, our destinies are pushed and pulled by the sparkling cosmos, kneaded and knocked back like baker's dough. You can try your best to stake out your life's path, or others' lives, as I do, but our human influence is limited. There are people, women and men, who become taken with a neo-pagan lifestyle, study Wicca, indulgently call themselves white witches. But if they truly knew their craft, they would know that there is no such thing. These dabblers are the moths of the sorcery world. Not unpleasant to have around, unless they get confused and start battering themselves against a light source that is not the moon. Some are elegant and pretty to look at. Others leave moth dust and holes in your winter underwear. There is no such thing as white magic. Real magic is a wide spectrum encompassing good and evil, and there are very many shades of grey in between. The reason a spell can never be pure white is because of the cosmic baker's influence. A sorceress may start out with a clear, benevolent purpose, unalloyed ingredients and a pure heart, and perform the incantation as close to perfect as she can manage. But after that, she has little influence. Once it is out of her mouth, the spell is out of her hands, and cannot be kept ungrubby. As with magic, is with witches. Just as a person cannot be 100% good, a witch, as pure thinking as she may be, cannot achieve perfect snow. Witches are human, after all. She may be milk, ivory, or limestone, or one of the hundreds of shades between them, but never fresh snow. You have this trembling human spectrum overlapping and interweaving with a sure orbit of magic, and it becomes evident, despite the illusions of the giggling Wiccans, that a white witch is nothing but a fairy tale. I am under none of the pagan pretenses. I practice grey magic, more dove-grey than charcoal, or more accurately, the colour of a rain cloud as it swells and shrinks and flickers between shades of pearl and slate. I have to be careful of slipping towards the sooty part of the spectrum. The darker the magic, the quicker the flame takes, the more powerful you feel. You have to be on your guard and think things through. Sometimes you set out to do good and the result is murky, or worse. I once killed someone with a simple love spell. That may sound like I'm just not a very proficient witch, but the opposite is true. The spell was one of my best, refined over and over again to be as simple and striking as possible. But setting out, I wasn't told the whole story. A woman had left a man, and the spell was to reunite them. What I hadn't been told was that the woman had left the man for someone else. That someone else happened to meet with an accident the day I triple-cast the reunion conjuration. An innocent bystander. He was shot in a cash-in-transit heist. My client, his grief-stricken lover returned, had been delighted and paid me double. It had not been my intention. Apparently they are happily married now. He still sends me fruit baskets. Taking lives is not always dark sorcery. Counterintuitive as it may seem, killing people is sometimes the kindest and most important work I do. In a topsy-turvy society such as ours, where your life is not your own, a sensible outsider, not bound by popular morality, is sometimes required. On occasion, a client needs to be supported in their decision to perform certain actions that are usually frowned upon by the bleating world at large. This is where my services come in. As a non-judgmental advisor, helper, sponsor, drug dealer, psychologist, relationship counselor, prostitute, or mercy nurse. Being a witch isn't about spells and trickery. Not really. More than anything else, it's about having a completely open mindset and having the courage of your convictions. In short, to be a consummate witch, you have to have a titanium spine. I help the client take a psychic step away from their supposed reality and offer them a perspective that is unconstrained by the values of others. I coax them out of the dogma box. Although most people seem happy to be trained and controlled by banks, employers, and television, it is only when we are unfettered by indoctrination that we can live our free and true lives. I help people with this awakening, but often this bitter, bright truth comes too late, when they are in an acute crisis or are dying. The client I'm busy working with has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He joked when he called me, saying, "There is no stage 5. He needed someone who was willing to end his life for him when the time came, and he found that time rapidly approaching. Just a month ago, he told me, he was driving his Porsche Carrera with the top down, meeting friends for lunch, drinking scotch, and following the Premier League. But now he finds his appetite vanished, his balance is off. He can't hear properly, doesn't have the energy to drive. Could it be true, he asks me, that my drive to the cafe around the corner for the paper was my last, that I'll never drive again? It wasn't just his beloved car he was grieving for, of course, but his independence, his life as he knew it. He is plagued by constant, empty pain in his abdomen that gnaws at his mood. He has no children. His wives are all estranged. His doctor says her hands are tied. There are no more treatments available, that she can only make him comfortable. Comfortable, he demands. What the hell is comfortable about dying? I wouldn't say he's at peace with his impending death, but he doesn't want to live like this. Not when we know there will be no improvement. I should be grateful, I suppose, he says to me. Going downhill so quickly. It's what every terminal patient hopes for. Once you reach the top of the hill, that is. It's difficult to be grateful when you feel your life is being snatched away. He's not the kind of man who will accept being bedridden or fed chicken broth with a spoon. He has lost 8 kilograms in the past 2 weeks. When he can no longer walk, I take things to cheer him up. He still likes iced coffee but refuses berry pinwheel pastries, his former favorite combination. On the 3rd day, the heavens open up and blast us with a dramatic thunderstorm. Once the rain slows, I follow the sound of mewling outside to discover trees stripped by wind and a skinny-ribbed kitten with opalescent eyes. I rub her dry with a tea towel to reveal tiger stripes and chinchilla soft fur. I place her on my client's chest, and she soothes him with her loud purring. I read the newspaper to him as his consciousness swims in and out of shallow sleep. I tell him the soccer score, who has saved a goal, who has been carded. I am with him for 5 days and 5 nights. Every hour drains me, although I try not to show it. We do this pretend dance of patient and nurse, until today when he takes my wrist in his cool, bony fingers and says he is ready. The truth is that nothing is being snatched away from him, not permanently. Once his heart stops knocking and his cells power down, his energy will move on to a better place. Not heaven or hell, not a resting place, but a living place. I have told him that energy cannot be destroyed, only converted. But his imagination cannot stretch that far. It's not a better place. Not necessarily, just different. Like a new day. You don't know exactly what it will hold, but it will surely be kinder to him than this suffering. We are all souls surfing through history. This moving on, this energy conversion, is why I have no problem with ending someone's current life. It is no more sinister than putting a child to sleep. There is a common misconception that ending a terminal illness requires active euthanasia, but this is most often not the case. The majority of the time, all that is needed is for the patient to sign a living will that refuses any further medical treatment, and for the caregivers to respect his or her wishes. The very last thing a terminally ill patient wants is to be fussed over with antibiotics and feeding tubes in order to prolong his pain, but this is often what families insist on. They panic and press red buttons and jam oxygen masks over their loved ones' faces, despite the clear DNR stickers, because they are the ones afraid of death. In most cases, I have found that if you cut off all access to medical treatment and are liberal with the painkillers, nature takes its course easily, and the soul is allowed to ascend, unbarbed, to its beckoning place. Sometimes gentle help is needed, extra analgesics, if you can get them, or a steady pillow over a slumbering face. I'm ready, he says to me now, clear-eyed. I'm ready to go. With a long match, I light the 9 black candles in the room and smudge with sandalwood and willow. I put a smooth obsidian stone in his palm. I recite the druidic death hex under my breath. The kitten's purring gets louder as the magic electrifies the room. I load up a syringe with morphine, 9 times the prescribed dose, and push the needle into one of the beetroot purple veins that snake over his arms. I can see the effects of the drug cascade over him. His relief is instant. I hold his hand as the spirit leaves his body. I feel a pull, a falling away, and then it's gone. The room exhales. The wheel turns, the cycle spins. There is no need to check his pulse, or put a mirror near his mouth to search for breath. Nothing remains but a sad skeleton in skin. The kitten cries. I blow out the candles and pack my things, including a fat envelope of cash with my name on it. I wipe the house down to vanish any fingerprints. After a moment's hesitation, I put the moping kitten in my basket too. I have always resisted having a cat, given my occupation. It seemed a terrible cliché, like sporting a wart on my nose or flying a broom. Today, however, I no longer mind the idea. I let myself out of the house and leave the polished key under the doormat. The wind has picked up, and dead leaves flutter and swirl across my path like ugly butterflies. The moon is waning, and I'm feeling a bit older, colder, bashed about. Burnt out. Ashes to glinting ashes. It will be nice to have a warm creature at home. We can sit in the oak tree together. The end.